It's Chris. News. Let's do it. News over 9,000. A channel is, that is. I mean, I just like talking about that old DBZ meme. So, what's going on? New year, new musings, same old at the same time. I talked about this a little bit in the quarter one upcoming crowdfunding video from earlier in the week, right? A lot of big companies haven't really laid their cards on the table. Where are the CMON campaigns? You know, I talked about a couple of them. The Genesis clans, we know Masters of the Universe, they hinted at DC United, but nothing is concrete. The only thing concrete from CMON we'll talk about in a second, because it's actually retail CMON? It's a whole other rant debate here we'll get into in a second. Awakened Realms. I mean, what are we going to see? Other studios, we know, say, Garfield Games. We know Adventures of the South Tigris, as well as one of the others that they did on the live stream. And Shem Phillips is going over with Storm Raiders from Arcus. And, we've seen a few of those. Thunderworks in the realm of role player. Where are they going to come out? We haven't seen a lot of the bigger companies really show their hand at all. IB Studios, what's in store for them? I mean, Level 99, are they going to come back with something else this year? Different or the same? I'm really intrigued, but we haven't seen hardly anything at this point. And I knew a lot of the first half of the year of 2023 at this point a year ago, which is very interesting on crowdfunding because I'm not sure why people now all of a sudden don't want to, talk about and, give some more information out on this stuff. Like, take an example from Stonemaier, right? The guy knows how to generate hype. You need to get your something out there for people to digest. Not that it needs to be digested, but, it helps at least put awareness. Now, we have to break this news at the beginning of the video because it's that big in some senses of the word. Stonemaier just released the latest hype announcement for their upcoming latest release, Wyrmspan. Yes, that is not just an April Fool's play off of Wingspan. It is actually a dragon-based version of Wingspan. Now, is it something different, though? Well, all signs point to yes, because they've already got the rules up over on Stonemaier's website. And the most interesting aspect of this to me was that somebody on Reddit was actually sleuthing and discovered it about 24 hours before the actual announcement, because they were looking at Stonemaier's copyrights that were submitted, and they had linked to the page over on Reddit, and they saw this along with a few others like Wingspan Go and Blank, a Wingspan game, and a couple of the other upcoming titles or potential titles, because there's also some previous trademarks even well before this one that have not been used to this point. So the question is, do you need it? I mean, it's definitely appealing to the fantasy crowd side of things that said, I'm not going to pick up Wingspan because I don't like birds, which, is essentially shooting yourself in the foot if you haven't at least tried it. Because say what you want about Wingspan as a whole, right? I will make the argument, as I did in a video that was not watched by anyone previously on this channel, that is arguably one of, if not the greatest contribution in more recent modern gaming history. In the golden age of board gaming, if you will. Now, I'm not discounting Catan, I'm not discounting some of those other achievements, but when was the last game that you saw that really, really went wide non-hobby, right? And that was Wingspan, getting media attention from outside of our little bubble, and has sold gadzooks amounts of copies in general to people and bringing more people into the hobby in the first place. There's not many others that you can say within the last 5 to 10 years that have done anything anywhere remotely close to that. And so now you're getting essentially what's looking like a 1.5 version, not a 2.0 necessarily, not a reskin either, with some new explorers and caves mechanisms. But yeah, and apparently you're going to even have opinions on it before the end of the month, because if you look over on Stonemaier's website, there is a somewhat usual cast of characters that apparently already have copies, because they're being listed as videos being available, a little over 2.5 weeks, essentially, from the time of me filming this. So you'll have some opinions whenever it actually gets released too, because there's only sign up for notification to buy it right now if you go to their website. So they're going to have that hype drum really rolling by the time it gets around to things, and expect to see, again, a lot of pre-ordering on this. A lot of pre-ordering, right? Because, crowdfunding is horrible, but pre-ordering something like this is absolutely okay, and they're not whatsoever the same thing. A little tongue-in-cheek there, but you know where I'm going with that, right? Pre-ordering games, whether or not you like it. You don't know, but you're going to go for it because it's going to feel like a gaping hole in your heart again. And the website actually gives a very good synopsis. Like, I don't even feel like they need to go over to Boardgamegeek to list out all the differences between said Wyrmspan and Wingspan. And this website is really nice, right? Here's your download for your rules. So if you want to check that out, 32-page color rulebook, they said, because they're also separating out all the lore and the facts about dragons from the cards. And so then it gives you bullet point by bullet point the differences in how you are playing the game very, very succinctly. Actions, caves, nest icons, resources, no dice, no bonuses, abilities being optional, endgame scoring, and everything else that you may want. Rules questions here, general questions here. So no, they're not compatible. No, there's no overlap. Will there be plenty of expansions to do off of this one just like the other one? Yes, absolutely there will be. And then like I said over here is the actual listed page of the trademark applications that I alluded to. Hurl, Skirm, and then you can see Wingspan Go, Wingspan Pocket, a Wingspan Game, Vantage, Origin Story, Stamp Swap, Postmark, and Tailfin, among others, and in Finspan, there as well. There you can see Expedition and Apiary, just so you know I'm not making it up, along with the Libertalias and the Red Risings. So that's interesting all in a nutshell. And then if you wanted the names of the people whose channels are going to be having it, you can check out their channels starting on January 2022. So there you go. Will I end up with a copy? Yeah, I'll try and trade for a copy, just like I did with more of their recent releases. Expeditions, that's still sitting on the shelf waiting for a final review from me. Apiary was out last month, so I'm relatively more pleased with their recent design releases. Have I been outstandingly, exceedingly impressed by any of them? Not terribly. Apiary might be on my top 10 of the year. I'm not sure about Expeditions. Personally speaking, mechanically, I prefer Expeditions in terms of just the pure mechanics, but Apiary is probably the better game overall, in my opinion. Not that that matters whatsoever. But I guess the real question you have to ask yourself now is this going to entice you? If the thematic incorporation of the first one didn't do it, is this one better for you? If the mechanisms of the first game didn't do it for you, is this going to change it and make it a little bit more complex and be more of your ilk? I don't know. Are you willing to try it? That's the biggest advice I give to people who are coming into the board gaming scene in general. So go try stuff. Sometimes you'll be surprised at what you like and what you don't like. Sometimes you'll think you'll like it up here, and when it actually gets down here, truth be told, the two are not equivalent, and sometimes vice versa as well. So that's what you kind of have to consider when you see something like this. And if you're someone who's a Wingspan all-inist at this point, how do you feel about that? Because essentially, it's sort of like Dune and Dune Imperium Uprising, right? You're going to prefer one or the other, but you won't know until you try both. Are you going to buy it? Are you going to buy it to find out? Or are you going to have somebody else buy it so that they can pay the cost and decide whether or not you should keep it? That's the way to go, folks. Because we don't always vote with our heads, we vote with our hearts. Our wallet suffers sometimes. Pre-orders included, right? This has me intrigued just like everybody else. I'm not going to pretend I'm immune to the FOMO finding out, wishing I was on that list of people talking about it when it gets embargo released. But you know what? It's going to be interesting. It's going to generate some conversation like they always do. And, I guess it already has because it's released at the beginning of my news video here as opposed to any time else. So there's some food for thought on that topic, but let's go on to the rest. Now, let's go back to that CMON thing, right? CMON actually is revisiting, remastering, re-editioning, whatever you want to call it from the video game linguistics side of things, A Study in Emerald. Now, A Study in Emerald is a classic Cthulhu style game with, hidden sides. And a lot of take that. And it's a relatively well thought of game, and it's got 2 editions. First edition, second edition. There's some debate about which edition is really truly the better one, and it's also out of print. It's been out of print for a long time. First edition will cost you somewhere between $150 to $200. Second edition will cost you probably anywhere between $50 to $75, depending on how scalped it is. And now they've actually got a pre-order pre-order on their website here, not crowdfunding, to take it to allow you to order it when it's going to be delivered in, wait for it, November. It's January. That's earlier than most of the online retailers will allow you to pre-order, right? You're going to get like a month or two in advance for most of those, unless they're the biggest of the big. So CMON's really marketing this. But let me show you this, because it's both good and bad from an interesting standpoint. So here it is. It's called Dark Provenance. The price is actually freaking good, right? $39, $40 for this? 5 exclusive investigators, though. 5 exclusive investigators. And you get a $10 discount from the retail. They see retail's going to be $50. I'm going to wait and see if, that actually holds true. But from a gameplay standpoint, because if I go back one page here for a second, this is the actual information page, right? I clicked on the pre-order now page. And so you can see more details on here, almost like a crowdfunding page. Your secret alignments, your assets, your recruiting, and wait for it, solo mode, which is new, exclusive stuff. You don't care about that. You do. That's the only reason you're going to get it. Rulebook, work in progress rulebook. And that's why people were speculating this is more like the first edition, which people say ultimately first edition was absolutely probably overall maybe better, but it was really confusing. There's a lot of errata, and there was some issues from maybe too much chaos in the rules play side of things. So they're streamlining it. They're making some of those rough edges smooth, apparently. I don't know. I used to own a copy of second edition. I got rid of it. Just never got played. But you know what? For $40 plus or minus whatever shipping is going to cost, as long as it's not the usual CMON shipping from overseas, right? I'm okay with potentially looking at this. This is not what I was expecting at all. You probably are surprised in the comment section going, are you serious, Chris? This actually doesn't look completely horrible. 1 to 5 players, 60 minutes. I'm right? Checking some boxes there. Now, I don't really like the exclusive side of things, but that's your incentive to pre-order. And we've seen it more from a lot of companies now. Dire Wolf especially, they're throwing promos with everything. And does that entice you to pick up retail more? I, personally speaking, I hate pre-ordering at retail. I could be clarifying there. I don't order a lot at retail either way. I trade for most of my retail games, to be completely transparent about that. But is that really a good thing? It's incentivizing you to back a company, right? We always talk about support the publishers. Support the publishers, folks. Support the publishers. Well, you can say what you want. They're a publisher just like anyone else, right? And they are a major contributor to the hobby. So is this something that you are willing to do from that aspect of things? But at the same time, if it's successful, what scares me is you're going to see a lot more of that on the retail. Crowdfunding has had already the pendulum swing from heavy exclusives to no exclusives. And now retail is slowly going back this way, and a little bit trepidatious about that as a whole. Again, going back to some of those other companies, what else are we going to see from some of these bigger ones? I think they have a lot of plates spinning. And so will we see a reduction of the number of crowdfunding campaigns from a few of these companies as well? Post-pandemic, now that things I think are maybe speeding up a little bit, or maybe not as slow from a supply chain logistics side of things. So we'll see. So what else we got going on? Well, Lorcana is still here, right? The third iteration of Lorcana, the Inklands, is going to be coming out soon. And the question is, from last fall, I don't want to say it's not even been 6 months at this point, but it hasn't. So is the Lorcana hype still real? Has that train sort of gone off the rails or evaporated? I don't know. People say, the pre-con starters aren't anything to, write home about, but they kind of like some of the construction side of it. I don't know. And is the other one that's going to be very shortly in people's hands, I would imagine in the next 6 weeks, some big channels, Dice Tower is going to have Star Wars Unlimited to a greater extent, just like they had Lorcana. And we're going to have some more concrete details. Now, the other thing, it's not really as much of a surprise because, I'm part of a Facebook group right now that's Star Wars Unlimited, and they've been proxying stuff, print and playing, for months. And so the mechanics, the games, the know-how, the deck building is already all there. But again, it's a construction. So when was the last Star Wars game that had more than a couple years support, right? I mean, Destiny's, I'll make the argument, died too soon. Same thing with Armada. Is X-Wing still being supported? Yeah, I mean, Imperial Assault did well, but ultimately Imperial Assault, although, that's probably the exception. Imperial Assault probably got the lion's share of support, and people really like Imperial Assault, but some of the others, I mean, have died a death too soon comparatively to the actual mechanical achievements of the game in the first place. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. Staying with that from an IP standpoint, Dice Throne is going to be soft launching soon or about this time at select friendly local game stores tournaments and conventions across the US, and tournament brackets, leaderboards, prizes. How do you feel about that? I don't know. That leads me into the next side of things, the World Series of Board Gaming, which, having Mr. Beast there was an awesome thing for just getting exposure in general. I think his charitable contributions are second to none. But the World Series of Board Gaming as a whole, it just makes me think of the College Bowl Series that's going on right now, or NFL football. You can't watch one of them or look into any of them nowadays without betting and gambling. And I don't really like seeing the board gaming scene go into the gambling side of things. I think that is a horribly, horribly slippery slope. And yes, I know the slippery slope fallacy, so I don't like this argument to begin with. I think it's a FOMO issue. I have very mixed feelings about the World Series of Board Games at this point. It may turn into something more. At the same time, it just feels like a big gambling board game situation for me. Now, it's not that. And, they've hired a bunch of people like myself to go there as guests and attendees and, do that sort of thing like all the conventions do. And so, I don't begrudge any of them by any means, right? I mean, it makes sense, right? If people are going to pay me to come out there and play games, I'm all for it too. But that's one of those things where that line is, perilously close for me going, leaning into the gambling side of things, paying money to kind of play a game. And it's not, I know it's not, but I'm splitting hairs here because you can see where it could easily turn into that, especially because it's out there. Not that board gaming and gambling, right? I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm probably just, shouting at the clouds as a whole. So let's get into the game side of things. What else we got going on? Did you know that Pokemon Splendor is a real thing in Korea and people have been importing it? And apparently they got an evolution mechanic that people are kind of liking. And so the real question is something like that actually going to get exported to a greater extent? Is some bigger company going to pick that up and go, yeah, we can make a bunch of money off of that? But it's probably a localization issue, just like CMON's Masters of the Universe, which, coincidentally, is now going to Europe with their crowdfunding campaign, which I'm guessing is sometime in the next month or two as well. Could something like that happen? Yeah. Does it always happen with the Asian games? Not as much as you may like. There are several Asian games that I have that I would love to see the localization become more worldwide. I stand by the fact that Rumble Nation, as an area control game, is one of the best area control games overall. I will stand by that. I will fight you in the comment section about it, but things like that I would love to see go wider. The other one that more recently announced, that I'm not going to mispronounce this one whatsoever, but it's basically Quacks of Quendlnberg Duel, right? 2-player Quacks of Quendlnberg, and people, were just basically discounting it. Like, oh, I don't like Quacks. It's too chaotic. It's a runaway leader thing. Oh, that's going to be a horrible situation with 2 players. No, actually, it's the same concerns. It's the same criticisms, overtly blanket statement that people said about Splendor when Splendor Duel was announced, which is sitting behind one of these over here. Bought that tooth and nail. That was one of my top 10 games of 2022 because it took the elements of the original, but it made them so much better. So much better. And it addressed all of those issues. And as a 2-player head-to-head game, it was great. And this is what I think it's going to do exactly for Quacks 2. Now, again, I could be wrong. I might eat crow on this one. But it's high on my list of retail games to acquire. The only question is going to be when it's going to come to North America or when we're going to get an English edition, because it's not a local North America game in the first place. Huge on that game. The other 2 games that I'm waiting for, Localization, Pandasaurus is bringing us Faraway, which is sort of a, set collection tableau builder with location dynamics. and how you arrange the cards is going to be very important. They're bringing that over to us sometime in the next month or two as well. And then the other big Essen splash hit, Evenfall, another tableau building, beautifully illustrated game, which mechanically speaking, I think you're almost sort of Pokemoning it, right? Catch them all. A lot of the copies I saw when I searched online recently, like through Facebook, right, were all Essen halls. So no clue when that's going to be available as well. But like that's my top 3 almost at retail right now, along with Cthulhu Death Providence from earlier, right? Can't remember the title now. That's how well I'm doing tonight, right? That's what you get for filming this after New Year's Eve and, you know, being up way too late, and the 9-year-old wanting you to wake him up 10 minutes before midnight so he can sit there and watch the ball countdown for the last 2 minutes. But besides the point, those are the ones that, I mean, I think are going to make some splashes and make some waves on the retail side of things so far, along with Mind Clash's Ironwood. I mean, all of those retail-wise, you heard it here first, right? Games that I am excited about. But let's go back to crowdfunding as well again a second, because at the end of the more recent campaign from Gamelin Games, they all of a sudden announced that Tiny Epic Game of Thrones is going to be the next one up. And speculation has run rampant. It's been on the Hotness list now for, I think, almost 2 weeks since it was announced. And there's no details. There's hardly anything to go off of. But the question is going to be, can you capitalize on arguably one of the hottest and then also one of the coldest IPs since the show ended? I mean, like, that season just, like, killed everything momentum-wise. Like, it almost became a plague to touch it seemed like. But the IP and the usage of it in a game situation, you know, the original Game of Thrones, which is now, what, a second edition with a couple expansions, it's just too big of a monster for most people to get out in a diplomacy sort of way. And so if you can distill that down, I mean, that's why when Shut Up and Sit Down reviewed A War of Whispers a couple years ago, that made so many people so excited, because they were looking at that as like the sort of gateway, the sort of streamlined, the sort of, you know, iteration of Game of Thrones that they were looking for in the first place, without all of the but all of the for you. So can they deliver? What's going to be the exclusive? What's going to be the incentive? Gamelin Games has not been as incentive crowdfunding heavy over the last year and a half, 2 years, as they were in the first 2 or 3 years that they were doing crowdfunding with these Tiny Epic series. And again, like I said at the beginning of this video, this pendulum has swung back and forth, and they're one of the companies that did that, and I don't blame them. But that's going to be the question, because IP alone isn't enough to grab me anymore. I want gameplay. I want gameplay. Gameplay triumphs almost everything all the time. Almost there. There's an asterisk. That was my big conversation point on my review of Voidfall from last month. So that's going to be the question to go along with it. How do you encapsulate that in a small series, a small box? You know, we've seen with many games, you don't need a big rulebook. Hansa, El Grande, a lot of the abstracts. You don't need big rulebooks to have a lot actually going on depth-wise in how you're taking those mechanics. But I don't need 37 different factions or houses necessarily either. There's a balance. Can they find and strike that right balance there? So that's going to be the question. Then a couple other expansion announcements already. Nucleum, one of the heavier, I dare say, I think a little bit more well thought of heavier Euros from 2023, has already got an expansion announced, even though the game was, you know, sort of the end. Wasn't it even Q4 of 2023? I mean, I don't think it was much before that. It was an Essen early release, but wide retail after. So, like, that's a soon expansion to be announced and to be releasing in the near future. Catan is also coming out with a new game called New Energies, offering new resources, an updated sort of like 21st century edition of the original, taking into account some of the environmental, ecological, just overall changes. And so they're just modernizing it essentially with a few new twists. And it's going to be a question of maybe, do you start there? Just like I recently recommended potentially starting here with Marvel United now. If you're looking into getting into something like that, is that going to be the better starting point for it with New Energies? Mechanically speaking, maybe. And it may win some people back if it's got a little bit more nuance there. Say like previously mentioned, Quacks Duel and Splendor Duel. So it'll be intriguing to see from that aspect. And then the other one that I've had on my radar for a long time, it's been on my wish list, it's been out of print, it's been unavailable to get anywhere, anytime, almost for any price, except for way, way overpriced, and that's Imperium the Contention. Again, a faction-based, asymmetric, deck-driven card game. And they're going to be coming soon, maybe sometime in 2024, with this crowdfunding campaign from Contention Games, but they still have Slay the Spire on their plate. And so they've very clearly said that they're going to see all the way to fruition Slay the Spire and everything that entails quality product-wise, and they're not going to rush anything from Imperium the Contention. Because there was a deluxe version which had like a solo, and that was just the different than the regular retail pledge level side of things. And, you know, people are jacking up that price for like $200 for the deluxe. And you can't even get the regular retail. So good luck if you're looking at it from someone like Mayam. You might just be waiting sometime until 2025 when that crowdfunding campaign eventually delivers, like the end of 2025 if it launches in 2024 in the first place. So that's going on as well. Then Monty Python, the Holy Grail, is actually getting a game. I just ran across that movie tonight on one of the streaming services. I forget which one. We were looking for a movie to watch on New Year's. So that's getting a board game. Holy hand grenade, folks. So she turned me into a newt, essentially. Is this going to be a newt? Is this going to be a frog? Mechanics, there's a little bit of information on the website. The designers interacted with a few of the forum questions, but details are still really sparse. I mean, again, speaking of nostalgia IPs, but, you know, whether it's this or anything else from my childhood, you got to win me over with the gameplay. So we'll see what they've got in store for us. Now, the other piece of news that I have to throw in here is that another expansion just came to my eyes when I was searching some of my old games when I was revisiting my list of top 2022 games. And that is War of the Ring, the card game. Not the solo expansion Against the Shadow, folks, but we have a new expansion upcoming sometime in 2024 of Fire and Swords. I'm intrigued because new scenarios. You can play up to 6 people. Don't care about that, because you're getting what I was looking for in Against the Shadow in the first place. 60 more faction cards, 9 new paths, 9 new battlegrounds, 13 different types of skirmishes, which are smaller settlements, fortifications, and locations within Lord of the Rings. So, yeah, 3 new factions to the game: the Northmen, the Easterlings, and the Ruffians. So 2 for the Free Peoples and 1 for the Shadow. I'm all in, baby. Speaking of not needing to actually think about pre-ordering things like I said earlier, right? But this might be one of the few. Now, this one is a more of a known quantity, though, because we already have the base game. But, you know, is that going to make me want to feel like I need Against the Shadow to be a completionist, a la the Wyrmspan people from earlier in the video? I don't know, but I'm intrigued already. And I found out, you know, as I said in my other video, Wandering Towers has like 6 expansions. Gonna go buy those, as well as Miss Over Carcassonne actually had a mini expansion come out in Essen, too. So... I'm picking up promos. What is wrong with me? Interestingly enough, there's not really a whole lot to talk about from the Hotness on Boardgamegeek. It's been relatively stagnant, except for a few of the titles I've actually talked about already in this video. And that's mostly because a lot of the Hotness has been from people's top 10s, because the top 10s are waging right now of 2023. I mean, you've got your Heat Pedal to the Metals, you've got your Arc Novas, which are, you know, sort of the in-betweens, right? But you've got the White Castles, the Void Falls, the Dune Imperium Uprisings, the Forest Shuffles, as well as Earth. So all of those are appearing on multiple lists. And I did the video last month as well, talking about my thoughts, concerns, questions, and rants on my unplayed games from the 2023 and my feelings on them and whether or not I was going to get them and how you compare games you've played versus you haven't played and would your ranking change. And so, you know, I'm trying to get a few more plays in of a few of these at the end of 2023, beginning of 2024. So when I have my top 10 later this month, hopefully that it will all be sort of settled out as much as I can, even though there's like 15 or 20 top games I'm not going to be able to play whatsoever because, again, availability, right? So, because again, availability, right? I'm just like you. I'm not going to buy $300 or $400 worth of games just to be able to put them on a top 10. Nope. Pass. Last up as well here, we got a little bit of news as well with the Dice Tower announcing that they're going to do a Hall of Fame, Board Game Hall of Fame, and they had the first like group of games get announced, whatever it was, however many, I forget. But again, interesting topic of discussion. I actually filmed a whole reaction video to that already, and I'm not sure I'm going to air it just because you know, an issue or a topic like this has to be so nuanced and so carefully crafted. And you know me, I'm not always the best with words. I'm a little bit glib sometimes, and I don't always come out exactly how I want to say it with a more nuanced discussion. It's not one of my strong points, but I just question the overall, like, why just the dice tower? Why not do it like a lot of the other let's say hobbies or special interests of, say, sports do it, where they get the players, they get the former players, they get people, coaches, they get media coverage, they get those sorts of people as well involved. Saying that it's going to be the Dice Tower Hall of Fame is nice and all, and it's trying to legitimize, I think, in a different way, but why not have publishers on that panel committee decision-making thing? Why not have, you know, big names from the publishing side of things and the designing side of things along with it as well, right? That was just something that popped up across my head. And then the other thing that just happened on the end of the year, right? There was a big discussion over on Reddit here, right, at the end of the year, talking about why the Boardgamegeek fundraiser failed, didn't achieve its goal this year. And the consensus was, well, it's a for-profit website that runs a fundraiser, and the interface, the website design, and the amount of sponsored content that has been present there, I would argue, and was pointed out, has dramatically increased probably over the last 2 years. And the back end, I'm sure, is more expensive to run and to update than I would ever guess as a non-website anything technically speaking from that aspect of things whatsoever. But it's also got almost, you know, 90%, 90+% of its content generated by people like you, people like me, that's posted there. So it hosts it rather than creates a lot of it. And, you know, you've got the giveaways, you've got the sponsored contents, you've got the crowdfunding countdowns, you've got ads all over the place, you have the Amazon affiliate links. I mean, all of that stuff has just grown and grown and grown over the past couple of years. So much so that I'd say, you know, some of those things that weren't even a thing before, with the crowdfunding countdown and all the sponsored videos that somehow just always get to the front of the line, there's just more of that. And those things are probably bringing in bigger chunks. And so, you know, if they don't hit their goal of, I don't know, $250,000 to $275,000 of a year-end fundraiser, how big of a make it or break it is that for a for-profit website with those other issues mentioned? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I just putting that out there as food for thought. I'm not saying, you know, one side or the other is better than the other. I'm just saying it's an interesting thought process, as also the biggest board gaming website by far that's on the internet, and that has really no rivals from a monopolistic standpoint. It's an intriguing thought experiment, if nothing else. But it's also a very valuable resource as a whole for the hobby. So there you go. Nothing like ending the video with two very non-controversial and totally going to be, you know, very genial comments in the comment section. Please don't say anything stupid in the comment section. Please, please, please. These are just, you know, food for thought. Again, it's interesting. It's overall growing the hobby. But there are also things that we have to tackle and talk about with a nuanced conversation, not a bash you over the head and call you names conversation either. So please don't do that. That's all I got. Stay classy. Have a great freaking day. It's January. Man. Back to the long work weeks. It's gonna be a long couple months. You know, it's a weird dichotomy here. Like, I go back, start of the new year, and I start, you know, saving up all my time off. Although we're going on a vacation this winter, which it's going to burn some more of my time off, which means the second half of the year is going to be even longer than I'd like to. So whatever. Can't do anything about it. 3-year-old's potty training though. So we're trying to get him completely potty trained before we go on our trip, because to have to take diapers on a trip right now would be absolutely like biggest quality of life measure as a whole. If you have kids, you know. If you don't have kids, you're looking at me like I'm crazy. That's all I got. Stay classy. Ramble over. Rant out. News video. Totally not controversial. Done. Thanks for watching.